We'll give it just a few more minutes here. All right, we'll go ahead and get going. Welcome everyone to Solar for Cities and other non-taxable entities. My name is Carrie Carney, and I am the Executive Director of 1000 Friends of Iowa. We are one of the co-hosts for this program. One of the reasons we decided to do this is we do a lot of work with local groups who are pushing, working with their cities to be more sustainable and find ways to cut greenhouse gas emissions inventory. We have a Best Development Awards program, and both the city of Perry and the city of Johnston have been winners of this program for their respective projects. They're both really exciting projects and are great case studies for other cities to take a look at how solar for your city might work out. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Katie Rock, who's one of the other co-hosts, and she can tell you just a little bit about the Polk Clean Energy District. Katie?
Yes, welcome. Thank you, Carrie. I'm Katie Rock with the Polk Clean Energy District. We are a newly formed nonprofit that's focused on advancing clean energy and energy efficiency and weatherization for buildings all over Polk County. So if you are able, we'd love to invite you. We are having a happy hour kickoff launch on October 19th from 4:30 to 6:30 at the Des Moines Heritage Center, which is in the East Village. If you've never been there, it's a beautiful place. So I'm going to add a link in the chat if you'd like to RSVP, and stay tuned for future opportunities to engage with us.
Thank you, Katie.
Thanks.
And our other co-host today is the Grow Solar program, and I'm going to turn it over to Natalie and McKinley, who can talk about Grow Solar.
Thanks, Carrie. So my name is Nellie Mahoney, and my colleague McKinley and I are we are supporting here today from TNC's perspective. So one, we are happy to be a co-host of this webinar, but focusing in a little bit on Grow Solar. So Grow Solar is a community group purchasing program that emphasizes solar education and volume purchasing to make solar more affordable for businesses and homeowners. And we have actually extended the program to October 31st. So there's still some time to get people to participate and be a part of the program. I can also put a little bit more information there in the chat as well. But also on another note too, we are also helping with some Q&A. So there will be some times to ask questions in the Q&A box, especially after Terry's presentation. We'll discuss a couple of those questions, but there will be some room to a little bit later in the webinar to highlight those questions. But McKinley and I will be monitoring that Q&A box. And we are just happy to be also a Grow Solar program partner and also a co-host of this webinar.
Thank you so much. All right. So again, make sure if you have questions, put them in the question and answer box. The chat is not going to be monitored. So make sure it's in the question and answer. I am going to go ahead and this is being recorded. So we will share the link of this after, probably tomorrow. Folks will get a link of this recording, and you can feel free to share far and wide if you'd like. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Sven Peterson, who is the city administrator for the city of Perry, and Terry Dvorak of Red Lion Renewables, who are going to talk a little bit about the city of Perry going solar, what that's meant for them, and a little bit about the economics. So I will stop sharing and turn it over to Sven and Terry.
Thanks. So a little bit about Perry. I don't know if anybody out there has been here or not, but we are about 20 minutes northwest of the Des Moines Metro. We're about a population of 8,000 people, and kind of a different thing about Perry is we are probably about 40% Latino, and kind of a mix of different industries, both you know, your classic manufacturing type industries, as well as some professional industries as well. So a good mix of businesses in town and residents as well. So kind of going back a little bit, you know, Terry and I have been talking for quite a few years now. He tends to be very persistent, which is good. But I had always really kind of had a vision for the city of Perry to end up being net zero when it comes to electric production. So, you know, through those conversations and the time was finally right, we did go out to RFP and got a couple of responses back, and ended up choosing Redline Renewables. And kind of going to the beginning of that process, our sustainability consultant is Impact 7G right there in Johnston. So they were a huge help to kind of help guide us through the whole process, and you know, make sure that we dotted our I's and crossed our T's on everything. So they were a huge help to us. So one of our first calls was actually to Alliant Energy, just to touch base with them before we did anything too big. And that actually ended up being a really great thing. So beyond this solar project that we'll get more into, Alliant Energy has a customer hosted solar program. Their tariff through the IUB. So we actually, at the same time, we're doing our project with Redline and Terry, as well as this customer hosted solar project with Alliant Energy. So we went down the road, I think about 10 facilities of city-owned facilities. We did this PPA with Terry and offset about 50% of our electric use as a whole across the board of city operations. Our Alliant Energy customer hosted solar program is going to be about 7 acres out at our former brownfield property, which was a railroad roundhouse. And that will actually offset the other 50% of our electric use. So by the end of this year, when that Alliant project is done, we will be 100% offset with solar for our city operations. But definitely the on-site project with Terry was key to making that vision come to life. And, you know, besides being able to offset our electric use and our greenhouse gas emissions, a big part of this really is the savings. So with those 10 facilities, once we are able to totally buy out the system and own it ourselves, we will be saving, in today's dollars, about $150,000 a year on electricity. So that will definitely be a huge help to us as we go along with our budget, and hope to increase revenues along with decreasing our expenses on everything we do. Another aspect that we looked at with this project was really trying to focus on multiple uses of the solar. A lot of times it's just on a roof, and nobody really gets to see it or use it or, you know, personally get any gain out of that. So I think Terry has a few pictures that we can go through, but one thing that Terry and I worked through was being able to use spaces that typically would not be able to be used. So parking lots, using green space without, you know, putting a fence up and just having ground mounted solar, and turning all of those into not only energy production, but we'll call it social assets. So we have some solar carports that are at our main city parking lot, as well as behind the public library that both the library patrons can use and the folks visiting our local DMAC Van Kirk Career Academy as well. So they can park under there, stay out of the rain, stay out of the sun. I know my staff loves parking under the solar canopies, especially in the summer, because it helps keep their cars nice and cool all day while they're toiling away up here with me. Another thing we did was build a large solar pavilion right next to the Raccoon River Valley Trail. And this is what we call Caboose Park, but it serves as our trailhead for the Raccoon River Valley Trail and soon the High Trestle Trail. So this will be the area where both of those come together, and we'll have some really great, not only solar energy coming off of those, but a space for events, whether that be community events, bicycling events, or just kind of that place that is known in Perry of, hey, meet me at the solar pavilion in Perry. So I know that's something that Terry has been excited about, being able to kind of brand that. Yeah, so I know I've talked, but Terry, I know, has a lot to say as well, so I'll turn it over to him as well.
Thanks, Sven. I'm Terry Dvorak with Red Lion Renewables. Yeah, we've been involved in this project. Gosh, Sven, I don't know what, 4 or 5 years, if not longer. Seems like it's been a long time. And yes, I have been told I'm tenacious and persistent, and for good reason. So I'm going to share a few of these, so you don't have to just look at my mugshot all the time. You can see some pictures that I'll show of our systems. But the process, Sven mentions the process. We did go to a public RFP just to make sure pricing was in line with what we were expecting. I'll get you the right pictures here. But it was one that we got creative. So we mentioned using unutilized spaces. I mean, one of the things is carports. I like using parking lots. It's an underutilized space. And yes, Sven's staff likes to park in the shade for a good reason. It's very nice to be able to do that. Other places, we got creative along the bike path, where we had the rec center that just simply didn't have a whole lot of space up on the roof for what we needed. So, instead of just taking up some ground space in this park, we created another creative way to let bikers come through, and they would ride underneath along the trail and be, very much as they come into town, they know that Perry's a green community, that we've got something neat going on here, and it's worthwhile. So those are just a few pictures of what we see. That process was pretty good. I mean, we did get a lot of savings out of it. I mean, solar is one that it works when it works. I mean, the technology works everywhere. That's pretty easy. But you get into the viability of it, and the economics is, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, depending on a variety of economic factors. Fortunately for what we did here with Spin, we looked at different ways to finance. This one went through a power purchase agreement, which is what I tend to help all the communities that we deal with. And we've got 123 different facilities out there in the state up and running right now. This is one that City of Perry didn't have to come up with any money. That's the beauty of the power purchase agreement. They didn't have to come up with any funds. We did, and they're just buying electricity, but they're buying it at a price that it worked out where they're saving $14,000 a year from the get-go. Once they if they elect to purchase the system down the road, then like Sven mentioned before, they'll be saving $150,000 a year. We can run different scenarios on if they elect to purchase, in year 5 or year 20, and that savings over the 30-year lifetime can be anywhere from $4 million to $6 million. So it works really well. We did the 9 facilities, actually 10th, because we tied one in and combined it. It didn't work everywhere. We didn't do the wastewater treatment plant. It didn't seem to work there. So we looked at all of them, and we simply took the ones that it did make economic sense. Obviously makes a green impact, and went forward with those. So when it works really good, and we find that in most communities there are multiple facilities that do work, some that don't, but usually there's some that do, and we like to help do that. So I'm just going to leave it for other questions you got right now. I'm sure there's a host of them.
And I did want to, Terry, if you could go back to that last picture you had of the canopy.
This one?
Yep, so this is about 550 feet of solar canopy over what is the High Trestle Trail through Perry. And this is one of those that Terry definitely let me push his boundaries, we'll say, with a little bit of creativity, but together we came up with this. And as you can see, and Terry can probably tell you the exact angles of all of these, but you can see they kind of go up and down as you go along the trail. So, you know, going back to adding some social benefit to the community, wanted to be able to have something that can kind of be that destination for Perry on the High Trestle Trail, so that, you know, long term, I think we're going to be looking at doing some art installations under there with lighting and hopefully some sound to it, to really make that an immersive experience as you come through Perry, and just help make, you know, reinforce that destination aspect of our community.
Okay, Sven and Terry, you have 3 questions. So to start, someone said, are you able to spread the solar production across meter consumption from several sites and over different rate plans, commercial, industrial, etc.?
The answer to that is really no. I mean, with almost every utility we deal with in Iowa, you have to be connected to the individual meter that you're supplying. So you don't get to build a big array in one area tied to one meter and get credited in other facilities. So this is why we've got all these different pictures, is because we've got all the different facilities, or all the different solar arrays are tied in their individual meters. So that's just some of the interconnection rules in Iowa. The virtual net meter is not allowed yet. I've tried it a couple of times with a few municipal utilities, gotten a little bit, but in general, no. You've got to be connected to the facility you're using the power at.
Perfect. And Doug asked, how long for the buyout? How long will the systems last before significant maintenance replacement is necessary?
I expect to not have to touch solar for about 30 years. There are 2 main pieces to the solar array. The solar panel itself, which has got a 25-year production warranty. I don't ever expect to touch those. They'll be sitting there for 30 years. I mean, we'll find a few duds once in a while in the first 6 months and replace those, but after that, I don't plan to touch them. The inverter is the other piece of equipment, and that's what converts from direct current to alternating current so we can use. That's something that's a plug and play, gets replaced 12 to 15 years. And we plan for that, but it's a very simple one. The maintenance is relatively easy. We just make sure after winter thaw, freeze cycle that everything, all the wires are still tight, and you know, we continually monitor it. And if we see that something is off, or, you know, breaker got tripped or something, we'll investigate. But it's that's one beauty of solar, especially if it's a fixed system, not a tracking one. No moving parts, pretty easy to maintain, really pretty much hands off. Love to go up there and just show it off. Don't want to go fix stuff.
Perfect. And final question, does your solar development also include battery storage?
We have started to look at battery storage. Batteries are on the cusp of being economical in Iowa. We've got 2 projects that are in the process. They're not turned on yet, that are going to include battery storage. What we're finding is that the economics, depending on what you're paying for electricity, is about a 2 to 3 hour window is where the feasibility is there. So it really depends on your usage pattern, whether it's economically viable or not.
Perfect. Thanks, Terry. And also just please continue to put any other questions in the Q&A throughout this session.
All right, great. Thank you so much. And then Terry will probably have you take your picture down and we are going to turn it over to the city of Johnston. David and Scott, we'll hand it over to you.
Great, thanks, Carrie. And hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Great. And I'm showing a presentation, hopefully. There we go. I'm Dave Lorden, Community Development Director for the City of Johnston. And so what I'll be talking about today is our City Hall project. So this is just a map of our Johnston Town Center, which is located in the northwest corner of 62nd Avenue, Merle Hay Road. We started planning for this town center more than 15 years ago, and really started active property acquisition and plan development going back about 2017, 2018. This whole development is a public-private partnership where the city assembled the land and went out through an RFP process, selected a development partner who is developing the commercial properties around City Hall and the yard, the center green space there. And then we've got an association set up between the businesses and the city that we're sharing maintenance costs and those kind of things. So collectively on this whole site, we really wanted to start, since we were starting with a fresh greenfield site, a redevelopment site, if you will. We wanted to really look at every kind of sustainable option we could. So everything from stormwater management, low flow, water fixtures, energy efficient lighting. We explored rainwater harvesting for irrigation, didn't end up doing that, but we looked at kind of every sustainable option we could to really reduce our footprint here. And that included solar as well, particularly for the City Hall structure. And so as we were putting the project sort of out to bid, the construction project out to bid, we did solicit proposals for solar to be added to City Hall. And this, we had a number of responses. One Source Solar was chosen. And this is right out of their proposal from back then. I pulled this up just because it points out a couple of things that were assumptions back when we were going through design. And as I'll show you here in a couple of minutes, we really hit pretty close to what we were expecting to do. But we have a 184 kilowatt hour or kilowatt system on City Hall. Going back to the original proposal, they were expecting to generate 219,000 kilowatt hours and offset about 77.8% of our energy efficiency from that system. Ever being cautious, we then turned over all the data to our financial analysts that we use for the city.
Hey, David, I'm
Yep.
sorry to interrupt. You're still on the map slide,
Oh, sorry. Let me see.
and we are still seeing like your presentation on the side.
Here, let me try. Try this. That work?
There you go.
All right, I'll go back. So here's the proposal that One Source put together, kind of right there in the middle, noting the 184 kilowatt system, expected just under 220,000 kilowatt hour production. And again, the 77.8% of our offset, bill offset. Just, as planning goes, you never know how those numbers are going to work out. And as I'll show you here in a minute, they've worked out really well. As I stated, we then turned all that data over to our financial analysts and said, okay, we want an independent analysis. And I know these numbers are small, but I'll talk through the highlights here. How does this pencil out for us as a community? And so he put together a 30-year model And again, we had a power purchase agreement with OneSource. So in order for them to receive the tax credits, they would have to own the system for the first 5 years. And so that's what's shown in the gray at the top. The city can purchase out the system in year 6 for a fixed fee. That's part of our agreement. As Terry noted, the inverters are warranted for the first 12 years. So in this model, we just assumed on year 13, we'd be replacing all the inverters. We assumed an annual maintenance / insurance cost of about $1,000. That's a little bit of an extra insurance. But I can tell you we're in, been operational about 2.5 years, and we've not spent a dime on any kind of maintenance on them, and really haven't had any issues whatsoever to speak of. But for this purpose, on year 13, we're assuming we're replacing all those inverters because the warranty was up. The panels are also warranted for 25 years. And on this model, we assume that, the end of useful life would be about year 30, which shakes out at the very bottom of an annual or a total savings over the course of those 30 years of about $175,000. And again, I think that's a pretty conservative model. We're not spending the maintenance money. We're, likely won't have to replace inverters on year 13 as soon as the warranty's up, et cetera. So all in all, the numbers penciled out for us through sort of an independent review. So we constructed City Hall. I just have to show it off because I think it's a beautiful building. And there's maybe the exciting picture for today's purposes, the solar array. The building itself has 2 levels, a lower level and an upper level. We've got panels on both sides. This happens to be the upper level. And fancy drone footage you can see there. The panels on both levels. I would note on the left side, the lower level, that array is a little bit smaller than maybe it could have been, largely because we get shadow at certain times of the year and certain times of the day from the overhang from the roof above. So how is it working? I noted we estimated annual production of 219,725 kilowatt hours as part of our original proposal, original design. Our actual from August 21 to July of 22, so a full year, was almost exactly that number. We are hitting 82.4% of our actual usage is coming from our solar. So we're actually above the percentage estimated in the original proposal. And on an average, it's about an $18,000 savings. And I would note, if you notice the blue line in this chart is the actual energy use. We were running higher than expected through the winter months as far as energy consumption. And so we've been working with our HVAC contractor in particular to better equalize our system to be a little bit more efficient. So I need to update these numbers as we look into 23, but we're expecting that gap to be smaller. And I think we'll actually end up long-term above that 82% that we're at currently. So with there, we'll stop and I'll turn it over to Scott to talk about.
Yes, thanks, Dave. So I'm Scott Pronoska with OneSource Solar. So, and mainly here to answer questions and so forth, just as Terry, to be able to explain how solar works more so from a financial standpoint when you look at a city municipality, or if you take it the next step into counties or even the education side of things. Both cities in this case had moved forward with, as Terry explained, the power purchase agreement, to where a third party, in this case us or Terry, will own that system and sell the power back to the city with a buyout that can be achieved from year 6 moving forward from there, depending when the city may choose to exercise that. As we know, which was through some of the introductions of who's involved in helping sponsor here, the Inflation Reduction Act does now allow for non-taxable entities like a city of this nature to still benefit from that 30%, which is typically a tax credit. It now is in the form of a rebate. So there are some opportunities where a city can come in, or again, any non-taxable entity of that nature can actually benefit from the entire savings of the solar from the very beginning. Of course, they have the cash outlay to own the solar from the beginning, but that 30% would come back in the form of a rebate at the end of the project. So there are a couple different approaches for non-taxable entities now with the Inflation Reduction Act to be able to benefit from on-site self-generation like solar. So there's a couple different ways to approach it. And then taking it to the next step when you start looking at all of the funding in place for EV chargers and that side of things. I think we're seeing the national progression where that's the next step with these solar arrays to then add those charging stations. And so that's another big focus for us, and I'm sure others as well. But questions or more details that Dave, that you'd like me to get into, anything of that nature?
We did not have any questions, at least for this part.
Okay.
So, yeah, thank you, Scott and David. So I think you heard from both the city of Perry and the city of Johnston that they use power purchase agreements. One of the reasons for that, as was mentioned, is that the tax credits that residential users and commercial users had access to were not available to cities and other non-taxable entities. That has now changed, and here to talk about that and the preliminary guidelines and other tax incentives that might be relevant is Anna Adamson with the Clean Energy Group. So Anna, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. And again, put your questions in the chat. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carrie. Thank you for having me here today. It looks like I'm sharing my screen, so hopefully that stays that way.
Yep,
My name
fine.
is Anna. Pronouns are she, her. I'm a project manager at the nonprofit Clean Energy Group, and in that role, I work with community service providers from across the country that are interested in installing solar as well as battery storage. Important for this conversation, a lot of that job recently has been researching the Inflation Reduction Act and the investment tax credit opportunities that ultimately make these projects more financially feasible. So what is the IRA and the ITC, Inflation Reduction Act, and investment tax credits, and why are they important? Like Scott and Carrie were both saying, the Inflation Reduction Act passed last year into law has updated it and expanded it in a lot of important ways. The base credit for the Inflation Reduction Act has been raised. That's the gold bar on the chart there, that 30%. It is now at 30%. Last year, I believe it was at 24%, and it was just going to go lower unless if law, as it did, change it. We also got a bunch of bonus credit opportunities, which you can see there in the blue and green. 10 or 20% extra bonus credits could be added onto that base credit to cover eligible project costs and ultimately be reimbursed to folks who are pursuing these projects. Lastly, and what I'll focus on for the first part of this conversation, is how these credits are now reimbursable and what that process is to be able to recoup those costs or get that tax credit. So direct pay, elective pay, that is the terms we're using. They're both interchangeable. That essentially means that folks that have no tax liability can receive the full benefit of the investment tax credit through a reimbursable rebate, essentially. The IRS prefers using elective pay in a lot of their resources. The Federal Department of Energy and White House use direct pay. In my everyday conversation, I usually use direct pay, so that's what I'll be using, but they're interchangeable. And you'll see both of those online if you're researching it. A couple things I wanted to flag is that everything I'm talking about today is based off of proposed rulemaking. It's not final. They had a public comment period open from the end of June up until August 14th. They're looking over those comments and feedback, and based on that, they'll release final rules later this year. I'm expecting them in the fall, if not a bit earlier, or winter, if not a bit earlier. The direct pay option will definitely happen. It's just how it's implemented and how folks can go through the process of receiving their rebate. That could change in little ways, I anticipate, but I don't anticipate any big changes based on what I'm talking about today. One last thing to cover my bases, I just want to share that this does not constitute professional tax advice because I am not a lawyer nor a tax code expert. If you want to pursue a project, you can absolutely reach out to someone who's a professional and has that detailed in the weeds expertise on this. I'm just sharing what I've learned based on days, hours, weeks of research on this for other projects. So who is eligible for direct pay? It's a whole bunch of folks, which I've quoted here on the slide, but it includes tax exempt organizations, 501A, C, and D, as well as municipalities and Native nations among the others listed there. It's also eligible for a wide range of quote unquote clean energy projects, as the government has stated is a wide range of projects, including hydrogen, et cetera, bunches of different things. For the purposes of today, I'll be focusing mostly on solar. My work also works on solar only projects, as well as battery only projects, battery storage only projects, as well as solar paired with battery storage. And all of those projects are eligible for the investment tax credit and the direct pay option within the investment tax credit. And that's within the statute 48, just for reference. So before I really dig into it, I want to cite some of my sources up front. You'll see some fact sheets on the screen now that I reference all the time on the bottom right. It's from Blue Green Alliance. I'll also be sharing links in the chat box after this presentation. I can also share my slides, which all these things are hyperlinked to. In the middle, the big one is the IRS. They have a whole bunch of fact sheets available for direct pay options, including this one that's specifically for tax exempt organizations. They also have their fact sheets translated into Spanish and have different audiences in mind for each of them. So really great resources coming out from them. I also included my own fact sheet that Clean Energy Group created for the direct pay option. Lastly, the two web pages that I referenced most frequently are the IRS's frequently asked questions website, as well as the federal cleanenergy.gov webpage. And both of those will be updated as the proposed rulemaking becomes final. Those will be updated with any changes that could occur in that. So now with that all out of the way, what is the process to apply for direct pay for folks who are pursuing a project and we're going to get one installed? So first off, excuse my cat, she loves the camera. First off, you apply for direct pay after the system has been placed in service. That's a language lifted directly from the IRS guidance and the law, but essentially that means after the project has been installed and commissioned. So you install the system and then you apply by filling out a pre-filing registration with the IRS. That form has not been released yet. It's only been referenced in the proposed rulemaking. The IRS has said that they will release the form later this year and folks can start filing through the form later this year. And it's essentially a form where you fill out, I'll call it the demographic information about your project, who owns the project, who is going to reap the ITC direct pay reimbursement from the project, how much solar, how much storage, if that's being included in the project, is there, how many kilowatts, kilowatt hours, and other information along that line. The IRS, hopefully this process will make the process more efficient and streamlined for the IRS so that they have this information before the tax returns are filed later that year. The pre-filing registration, after you fill that out, within a couple of weeks, the IRS will come back and give you like a document number associated with that. And then that number you'll put on your tax return when you file it, however much time later. And like I said, essentially, we're hoping that this makes it more streamlined, more efficient, and so that folks get their reimbursement quicker after they file their tax returns. Once you file your tax returns, you'll receive your direct pay reimbursement. We'll get into timelines for that on the next slide. The 30% base credit should be eligible for projects that were installed between 2022 and 2032. So it is a long time span that folks are eligible for this at this current rate of a 30% direct payoff of eligible costs. And while I'm here, eligible costs include like the solar panels, the paneling, the racking materials, that sort of thing. It doesn't include, for example, like if your roof needs repaired or replaced, that's not usually included in eligible costs. But again, eligible costs, that's just lifted directly from the law of what's included there. Great. I think that's about it for this slide. I blew up the picture a little bit more on the timeline here, an example timeline that I got from that Blue Green Alliance fact sheet. So if a project were to install, if a project was going through installation, let's say next summer, and their tax return was filed May 15th, 2024. So they'd have to wait for the next year, 2025, to file their taxes. So a project was installed that summer. You can file your pre-filing registration anytime after that project has been installed. So if it was installed in July, you could do it in July or August, or a little bit later that year. Then you have to wait until your tax return is due in May 15th. So essentially that 30% direct pay, you have to have a way to be able to cover that either through your general operating expenses or through, like I'll talk about briefly in a minute, other leasing, loaning, et cetera, for that 30% part of the project, because you won't get reimbursed until after your taxes have been filed. So there's still that little period that you have to figure out what you want, what you can do, how you can manage that. And then once your taxes have been filed, because this has never happened before, I mean, to this scale at least, we're not sure how quickly the IRS is going to get that money back in your accounts. So we're telling folks after projects, at least from the CEG side with our partners that we've worked with, we're telling folks expect 12 to 24 months from the time the project has been installed. Be prepared to have to cover that 30% for 12 to 24 months, just because we don't know quite how quickly the IRS will get this. So if it gets installed in June 2024, you may not get it until June 2026. Of course, hopefully it's much sooner than that, but it all just depends. And we frankly don't know yet. So how can projects be covered? How can you finance them? Like the two cities had already shared, they'd gone the PPA, powered purchasing agreement route. You can still go that route. And they would reap the ITC benefits and pass some of them ideally onto the municipality or the tax exempt organization, tax exempt entity. I'm not going to dig into this too much just for the concept of time, but there's also, crossing fingers, hopes for more innovative models to emerge for financing, like I've heard talk of, but nothing's been announced publicly, that some financing models are looking at offering loans for folks to cover that 30% or 40 or however much of the ITC until you get that direct pay reimbursement, so that folks don't have to carry that. Let's say it's a $10,000 project, that $3,000 load, or, projects are more expensive than that. So something that's very low interest rate, maybe even 0% interest rates, but nothing that I've heard has been announced that way. I've just heard talk of it. So hopefully as the ITC updates are around for longer, more things will get announced that are innovative and make this a good deal for folks. So I've spent most of my time talking about that 30% base credit and the direct pay and how folks can take advantage of the full amount of that base investment tax credit. But now I just want to go briefly over some of the bonus credits. I'll say the domestic content one I don't focus on too much in my work. The low income residential program that should be of interest for affordable housing providers, public housing, that sort of thing. The two I'm going to focus on are the energy community and the low income community. And that's because both of them have maps. I forgot I had this slide here. Clean Energy Group, we've also developed a set of one-page fact sheets for each of the bonus credits. So if you're interested about what projects are eligible for each of the bonus credits, you can reference those and have that information easily available. The 10% energy community bonus credit, the Department of Energy has released an interactive map, which I'll again share the link to, and you just put in the address of where the project site is going to be located, and they'll tell you if you're eligible, because this is for projects that are located near coal communities. I or communities that have a certain amount of the GDP for that area is with fossil fuel resources. It doesn't look like any place in Iowa has that, but there are some coal communities that are eligible for this 10% adder. The 10% low income community bonus credit similarly has an interactive map. Again, just put in your address and you'll know right away if you're eligible. I don't know for the energy community bonus credit. I think you apply similarly as direct pay, whereas you apply as you're filing your taxes. I think this one, the low income community bonus credit, you need to apply before your project gets installed, and you need to receive notice that you've received the bonus credit or you've been allocated. In other words, you need to receive confirmation from the government that you're eligible for this bonus credit before your project has been installed. So this is something you want to look at very early on in the project, and before you get to the RFP and the installation and all of that, you really need to look into and apply for this bonus credit. Information about the application for this and everything in the fact sheets. The government did just release recently their final guidance for this, so it's all said and done, at least for this year's application process. The rules are out there. I haven't updated the fact sheets yet, but I plan to by the end of the week. So final information on that should be updated soon. Lastly, I just wanted to share a little bit about my work at Clean Energy Group and the Technical Assistance Fund. We support community service providers in exploring what solar and battery storage can look like for them and how it can bring resilience to their communities. So for example, we've worked with public housing, other affordable housing providers, resilience hubs, which can be schools or YMCAs or just different community facilities that want to serve as places where folks can go when the power goes out, so that they can plug in their phones, or if they have electricity dependent medical equipment, they can use the energy from these community facilities, go there and you know, plug it in. Also, folks who have temperature regulated medical medicines and things, they could put those in the fridges, et cetera, et cetera. Essentially, this is a program where we connect you with an engineer to get you that preliminary information about what size solar and battery storage you want to look at, et cetera, what it will cost. And then folks usually leverage that to pursue funding, fundraising, grant awards, et cetera. But it's a no strings attached program. We're a nonprofit. We just want to help other folks that want to provide resilience to their communities. And I wanted to share that with you all. If that resonates with any of you, please feel free to reach out about that. Or if you're not interested in this, but have questions about the ITC and IRA, you're welcome to reach out about that as well. I welcome any questions here or afterwards. And with that, I'll wrap it up. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Anna. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Natalie and McKinley. There are some questions in the Q&A. I also wanted to just let folks know we did put the links again in the chat. So we'll remind those again before we wrap up. So Natalie and McKinley.
Yep. So another question from Doug says, what size generally of array pencils out for ground mounted systems, roof mounted? Probably one for Terry.
It depends on what utility you're in. What we generally find out is systems, most ground mounts pencil out throughout the state, to be honest with you. Small ones are just as good as larger ones. In general, most mid to smaller facilities have a higher electricity rate, so the payback is quicker with solar. So if I look at like a school district, usually what we find out is the admin building, the bus barns, elementary schools are very feasible, but then you get a high user like a high school campus where the rate structure is different, and instead of trying to offset 14, 15, 16 cents, we're trying to offset 4, 5, 6 cents. So just depends on the rate structure where you're at, whether it's feasible. as feasible.
Correct. It's the same with the utility, as Terry mentioned too. If we're able to go after 100% with a net metering utility, or if it's an REC or a non-net metered where we're going after maybe 50 or 60%. So that makes a difference. Cost wise, ground versus roof depends on where you are located next to the meter and those types of things. So depends. You're a little more efficient on the ground and more production per panel, if you will. So some of those costs are offset. So it's a case by case when you custom design and lay out a system based on roof line usage and meter location.
Okay, and we also have a couple more questions. So Doug asked, is the ground mounting structure an eligible expense?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, racking is eligible if you do a carport canopy, if the structure is holding up the solar equipment. So if you took structure away and the solar would fall down, then it's eligible.
And the last question, oh, another one popped up, but do brownfield sites also count as energy communities?
Yes, I forgot to mention that the map only includes the coal counties, I'll say, and the fossil fuel other index, but brownfields are also included. They're not represented in the map. So that's a good catch.
And that the new question is, do you only work with large utility companies as well, like Alliant?
We work with all of them, and we work with small municipal utilities. I think Scott does too. I mean, municipal utilities are rural electric co-ops throughout the state. It is interesting because when you get into the smaller communities, they all have different rules. So what's feasible in Alliant territory may not be as feasible in Midland Co-op because their rules of how, what your rate is, and particularly what you get compensated when you're producing solar and not consuming it, sending it back. That's kind of the key in the feasibility standpoint.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions.
Okay. Feel free, if there's other questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. I want to thank Anna, Terry, Scott, David, and Sven for presenting. This has been great and very informative. I do just want to reiterate in the chat, there is the link to check out the Grow Solar Polk County website, the link for the Polk Clean Energy District kickoff event on October 19th. I also put a link in there for the 1000 Friends of Iowa Best Development Awards. At the very beginning of the presentation, when I was doing the introductions, I mentioned that both the city of Perry and the city of Johnston had won awards for these particular projects. We currently are taking nominations for the next round of awards. We award for outstanding developments in 12 different categories. We have an independent group of judges who choose the winners, and then we have an awards ceremony in January. So you can nominate projects up until November 17th. So the link is in there. And as I mentioned before, this presentation has been recorded, so we will share that. Any last comments from any of our panelists before we sign off? And again, feel free if there's any other questions to go ahead and put them in the chat.
Well, I'd invite everybody to go check out some of these communities. Go up to Perry, look at some of these different solar arrays, parking lots and structures along the bike paths. Dallas Center, if you're down in the southern part of the southeast part of the state, go to Burlington or over to Wapello and see what the kids did at Wapello schools. And Scott's got them throughout the communities too, or up to Jester Park, and just see what can be done. And then get a hold of us and let's see if we can make something work.
All right.
Yeah, it's only limited by your creativity now with the way the carports and some of those structures can be built. And Terry's exactly right. There's so many different opportunities out there and so forth. Get out, experience that, and then touch base with us, and we can help you walk through some of that process and look at the financial piece of it as well. So I appreciate the opportunity.
And David, there is a question in the chat that I think would be directed towards you. Doug asked, how did you start the thought process or analysis, or consultants come up with the concept and then put out the RFP?
Good question. So we were obviously starting, we were on a new building, so we had a full design team as part of that. And so it was our request, it was staff's request to explore it, but we had all the right individuals at the table. So we were already doing energy modeling as part of our, our HVAC design, building design, and those kind of things. So our consulting team did help with the RFP, help put it together, but it was at staff's request.
All right, very good. There was also a question about the slides. I will see if I can get the slides from our panelist, and we'll share them with what I get, but we are recording this, and that recording will be shared with everyone as well. If there are no other questions, again, I want to thank our panelists. We truly appreciate this, and we do hope that more communities definitely consider going solar, because it does definitely make a big difference. With that, thank you very much, and we will close out.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.